Welcome back to the Panel's Choice. Here we ask each panel member to pick a topic from this week that they feel is important to discuss. We'll start with Jim Robbins' pick. Jim wrote a piece this week discussing who's to blame for the Afghanistan disaster. While Biden certainly bears the brunt of it, there's plenty to go around. Jim, what happened?
Well, headline aside, Joe Biden was definitely responsible for the chaos of the pullout. I mean, he completely screwed that up. He just had no clue what was happening in Afghanistan for the end game or the strength of the Taliban. But when you look at the bigger picture, our 20 years involvement in that country, it was too long. You can't nation build a country that doesn't want to be built. And we lost focus on our key part of our strategy, which was disrupting al-Qaeda, punishing the Taliban for supporting them, and diminishing threats to the United States. We got that done very quickly in Afghanistan, more quickly than anyone expected, just a few months. I mean, Osama bin Laden thought we would be like sucked into this punishing guerrilla war with high casualties for a long time. Well, we kind of were, but voluntarily. We could have left much earlier.
And whose fault is that? Is that the Department of State, the Defense Department? Who is it that really should have been pushing for a different strategy?
Well, it's shared blame. Politicians, policymakers, I think just American optimism, like, hey, maybe we can make Afghanistan into Vermont, or something like that. But I think really it was politics. I don't think any president wanted to be the one who pulled out and then the Taliban came back to take that political hit. Now, Joe Biden is now taking that hit. His approval ratings are falling, and it's complete chaos over there. I don't think it would have been complete chaos if we had pulled out earlier, but at least the lesson is learned. Focus on direct threats to American national security, and that's it. Like Donald Trump did with ISIS. He went in, he took care of ISIS, we got out. That's the model.
All right, very good. Thank you for the topic. Next, we've got Malik's Pick. The left has enlisted an army of doctors to peddle their narrative. Doctors used to be a trusted source of health information, but with the left's radical politicalization of everything, doctors are now targeting the unvaccinated. Malik.
Yeah, this is pretty troubling. Ever since last year, the discussion was, don't listen to politicians. And I say this now, don't listen to politicians, don't listen to people on the news. Trust your doctor. Well, your doctor may not have compassion for you if you choose not to get the vaccine, which at this point is a choice. I've been vaccinated. It was a choice. I don't begrudge anyone for not doing the same thing that I did. But when you have doctors, and I don't know if it's in the medical profession, I don't know if that's called the Hippocratic Oath. I think maybe so. But when you have a doctor projecting that I'm losing compassion for you, my patient, I think that is a very big problem. And if you look at just where the COVID cases around the country, if you look at the actual map, it is all around the country where the cases have actually ticked up. So this isn't a thing of the unvaccinated. And keep in mind, what we're talking about now, we're not talking about social distancing. We're not talking about sanitizing, your environment. We're not even talking about comorbidities. We're talking about unvaccinated. So all of the things that we were told last year that could help prevent COVID, none of that really matters. Being vaccinated is what matters.
And it's interesting because they're also coming out and saying you have to be vaccinated, you have to be vaccinated. Oh, but the vaccine doesn't work.
Right.
So there's a bit of schizophrenic messaging.
But trust science. Trust our medical professionals.
So how do people know at this point what science is right?
We don't know. I'm one of the few people in my immediate circle who has actually been vaccinated. And I'm the conservative. Most of my friends are liberals. Most of my friends who are liberal in my inner circle have not been vaccinated. And
Why?
I'm okay with that. I'm not preaching to the choir because they don't trust it. They're saying that either, I'm too young, or I don't have those comorbidities, or I don't trust, this vaccine that Joe Biden said, if it's not FDA approved, I wouldn't trust it.
Right, looks like Donna was real fast.
One of the things that they've been lying about, one of the largest groups, too, that are unvaccinated are African Americans and Latinos. Only 31% of African Americans are vaccinated. In New York City, only 21%. Latinos 41%, because they've been saying it's systematic racism and don't trust the government, but now we're supposed to trust the government. And so that's the largest groups of individuals. They don't trust the vaccine, they don't trust the government, and now all of a sudden they're going to be the ones that are victimized because now they can't get jobs.
Right.
They're going to be fired. They're not going to be allowed in restaurants. And it's African Americans and Latinos.
Right. It's a very schizophrenic message. Next, we've got Jim Hansens' pick. United States institutions have failed as it relates to Afghanistan. Jim says they have been co-opted by the left and no longer function.
And that's a horrifying thing for anybody who, like myself, has been part of our national security apparatus for most of my adult life. We used to be able to rely on at least one thing. We could disagree on strategy and tactics, but at least we had competent people running them. And I think we've lost that. I think in the same way that the woke left took over academia and education and the permanent bureaucracy of government, that included institutions we didn't think they'd be able to ruin, like, the State Department they owned for a long time. But the military? Now we have a woke military that has been, taken away from their core mission of war fighting and deterring our enemies, and now spends its time planning pride marches, and worrying about white rage.
Right.
You've got oxygen thieves like Milley and Lloyd Austin running things who should not be in charge of anything more dangerous than a lemonade stand, and we're seeing the results of that in Afghanistan.
And Milley came out this week and said we had no intelligence that Afghanistan would fall to the Taliban in 11 days. In the same speech, he also says, well, it could have been a week or two. Well, it's kind of the same thing. So is it a lack of an intelligence or a disregard for the intelligence that actually does exist? Or if we don't actually have the intelligence, that's a massive failure.
We had intelligence from our intelligence community. We do not have intelligence, to steal your joke, at the leadership level at the Pentagon. And that's the problem. We can't have people who are not focused on the lives of Americans at risk in Afghanistan and are more focused on the political fortunes of Joe Biden and the woke left. They are ruining it, and it's now infected what I thought was an institution that could not be corrupted. The woke military is broke.
So what needs to happen either internally in the Pentagon or, Americans with the Pentagon? Because we see what Milley's doing is not in line with what most Americans want, and I would venture to guess most service members want. I served in Afghanistan, and I've had several people reaching out to me this week that I served with. Like, it's hard. Like, things that those of us that have served in Afghanistan, it's hard right now. What do we do?
We purge the woke generals, admirals, and civilians from the Pentagon. And whoever is the next Republican in the White House, hopefully in 2025, needs to send his chief of staff down there, actually bring them to the White House, have them come and tell them to bring your deputy. Because if you don't give me a good answer about how you're going to change the culture at the Pentagon, you're gone, buddy. Pack your bags, you're out the door. And that needs to happen at probably the first 3 levels of leadership, civilian, general, and admiral at the Pentagon.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. Well, thank you for the topic. Lastly, we've got Donna's pick. Apple, American Airlines, Coca-Cola, Pfizer, and Target failed to justify their continuing platinum partner support for the Human Rights Campaign, the HRC, after the Free Enterprise Project brought to their attention how HRC has opposed sexual assault victims, girls, and women's sports and religious liberties.
There's a lot of reasons to oppose the woke corporation and them supporting woke activities and woke organizations, and this is just an example of it. These people are not trying to combat discrimination and bigotry. They're engaged in it. You have individuals, a number of them, including the president of HRC, who was the enforcer for Cuomo to sexually harass and dehumanize the victims that came forward that was sexually assaulted by Cuomo.
Can you explain that a little bit? What does that mean that he was the enforcer?
He provided the slut-shaming files or burn files on these individuals to discredit them in the press, to discredit their testimonies in order to be able to get Cuomo off. And the Attorney General of New York identified the fact that They were responsible for creating a hostile environment to anyone who spoke up and said that they were being victimized. Now, the president, Alfonso David, refuses to step down from a human rights advocacy group. And Coca-Cola, American Airlines, Pfizer, all of these targets, they refuse to take away their support for this kind of activity, and it's wrong.
Why not? I mean, honestly, who really cares? Like, corporate sponsors are great, you know, if you're getting advertising money and all that, but as far as just endorsing a project or a campaign like the Human Rights Campaign, like, why do these corporations care enough?
They're bullied into it. They think that there's a net-sum game, that in order to raise up one group, then they have to tear down other groups. And they're so afraid of these loud voices that are really against what the American people want. Because you can see it in advertising for the Olympics and all of these things, where all of these people who claim to be social justice warriors their ratings have plummeted.
Thank you so much for the topic. Don't go anywhere. When we come back from the break, we'll visit Don't Be Fooled and my closing argument. We'll be right back.